We are on the record. This is a meeting of the Freeport Withdrawal Committee on Tuesday, May 22nd at 6:33 p.m. Freeport High School Conference Room. In attendance, we have Rich DeGrand-Prix, Kate Warner, and Pete Murray. Dennis is coming late, I believe, or maybe not at all. I can't remember. Did he?
I think he's going to make it to this, but maybe not our next.
Okay,
Right.
I think that's what I remember as well. So he should be coming. And the first action is to waive the reading of the minutes and accept them as written. May I have a motion to waive the reading of minutes and accept them as written?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any questions on the minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. That's passes unanimously. Okay. Next on the agenda is to review for the negotiations meeting on June 4th. So as most folks know, we had originally scheduled a meeting for last night with the RSU group, and that meeting was canceled pending a meeting that was scheduled with the Department of Education and the Commissioner that we couldn't get scheduled until next week. So that's happening next Thursday morning. And then we will next convene with the RSU group on June 4th. And hopefully that meeting in Augusta will prove enlightening vis-a-vis our current impasse that we're at. So the next negotiations meeting will be on June 4th, and hopefully it will focus on enrollment commitments and hopefully also finances. And I've teed that up with the chair. There's Dennis. All right,
Gang.
come on in.
Just getting started.
We're just getting rolling. Come on in. So
I'm trying to behave. It's early still.
you got all Snickers now. You see, this time it's all Snickers.
All Snickers.
You decided to go just
Hopefully
for the
you
good
don't have a peanut allergy.
Oh, the worst. No.
Great for you.
No.
Might want to see if I haven't eaten yet.
So we were just updating folks that we were last night's meeting was canceled, and that we're going to meet again on the 4th. And that in the meantime, there's a meeting scheduled next Thursday morning with the Department of Education. So.
Oh yes.
And we'll be meeting after that.
And we're going to meet right after that. So we're meeting.
That'll be at the
Noon,
town
you said
hall. in
noonish?
Freeport.
Yeah, we're meeting noonish on Thursday
And that'll be at town hall.
at Town Hall.
That's the 5th.
That's the no, that's
Thursday.
it's next
Oh,
where is it?
29th.
29th, that's right.
29th.
29th. So the 29th at noon at Town Hall, and it might be noonish depending on when we get out of the thing in Augusta. Or we're on at 10 in Augusta, so
Okay.
I can't imagine it'll go longer than an hour, and
Yeah,
then we
I
have
won't
an hour
be
back. So okay, you won't be here for that. Okay, good. Other than that, I think that there has been, you guys had a meeting with looking at some of the finance stuff, Kate and Rich, right?
Yes, we did. We met with Abby.
Do you want to briefly summarize that?
Well, what we're trying to do is gather up information, so we have some sort of historical data to work with. And we'd asked Abby if she could talk with us a little bit about some of the capital plan information when in the last couple of years that we were part of, we were a Freeport only district. And so what we have is the capital budgets for those for the last 4 years, and also a copy of a 20-year capital plan that the town had developed. It included repairs for schools going forward. So we just wanted to kind of take a look at that, and at some point, maybe if it's not tonight at our next meeting, put that in context with the information. And I've talked with Dennis about the facilities committee. I have a notebook that's huge. He thinks he can pull together the notes from individual years for the facilities committee discussed on the capital budgets for the RSU going forward. So if we have, with a combination of documents, we can maybe make some sense of some of the capital items that we're going to be discussing with the RSU, with the working group.
Okay.
We're also looking at bus inventory and ins and outs there as far as what each town contributed for buses and what was purchased under the RSU.
Yeah, in my conversation with Dennis, he said both communities brought one bus to the table when we consolidated, and the rest of the buses really they've hired Bomar largely for transportation in Durham. There was one bus I think previously in Pownell being used that way, and I think they had a second bus that they didn't use all the time, and I don't think that came into the district when we formed.
So Bomar was a vendor that supplied both the staff and the
Yep.
and the bus.
They provided the transportation,
Yeah, okay.
and there's a I probably can't touch it in this pile here, but we do have the current contracts with Bomar for their providing transportation this year. It was a 4 or 5 year contract. I think we're in the second or third year.
Yes. Oh, hi.
Come on in.
So cozy.
Pretty cozy in here, huh? Yeah.
I think the custodian's looking all over the place.
No, I'm sorry.
No, okay, I should have known.
We had a sign out, don't we?
Yeah, we have, yeah.
There's a sign out on the door,
Sign out,
but
I'm
maybe it's not
sorry.
big enough.
Yeah. And then we're also looking at the revenue funds as well, to see what a proper allocation may be with regard to the building funds. And
Yeah, and we need to work on that strategy. So Abby said there were some of them that did not get transferred in. So there are some that are still existing in Freeport.
some scholarship funds.
You know, so we need to just get them all written down and on the table so we can figure out if there's anything that needs to change, what that would be. So
Okay.
it was helpful.
Seems like there's a lot of detail work there, and we'll have to clip through that with the RSU group when it's time to do that, and hopefully we can get to the point where we've agreed all the major terms and we're just talking about bing bang bang bing bang bong through that
Yeah.
financial stuff.
And
They have the same list. Are we sharing that list?
Yeah, I mean, they have all this information, but I think that really what it comes down to is we're hoping to TA some language
Right.
and then create an appendix that would outline,
Gotcha.
you know, the financial, the numbers of the components.
We need a philosophical approach, I think, overall for the contract, and then we can work out the numbers.
Yeah.
from there.
So, and that's something we'll be working on between this and our next meeting probably.
Dan's coming in, he should be here in a few minutes, and we'll continue our dialogue on the contract and those specific legal terms. I also talked with Paula Graval this afternoon about getting she's going to run the state algorithm for dividing up the GPA and which is a state subsidy spreadsheets. She's going to run those for us as a standalone district. She said she might get to those maybe as early as the first week of June, maybe later. She's got a pile of stuff, but she's working on them, and she knows we want them, and we're on her list of things to do. So we'll at least have an idea of what the revenue side from the state will look like once we're if we are to stand alone. What that looks like.
It would be helpful if we know not only ours, but what the RSUs would look like also, because I think it's significant.
She's going to run them
talk.
both. Yeah,
Okay.
she'll run them both.
Good. Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
Because if that, we're gonna be having, it'll be a discussion with the working group, so it'd be helpful, so we do have that number. And if she sends them the information, they'll have it also. They won't have to question.
I think this is most relevant for us for budget estimation purposes, which will happen after we've got a contract or an agreement in place, or an agreement agreed to anyway. And when we're trying to figure out what the finances might look like as a town, that'll be important information to understand. So she's working on that. Should be forthcoming shortly.
Great. Do we have anything else going on with DOE at this point? We don't have any other outstanding questions other than your discussion next week.
No, I think we should ask. Now's the time to make a list, because what'll happen next week is it'll be myself and Michelle from the RSU, and then each of our attorneys and Jim Ryer in the room. So it'll be a small group. And so if we have additional questions that we'd like to get answered, this would be a good time to figure that out, and I'll give them a heads up and ask them. Yeah.
There are no special ed subsidies or regional. pass-throughs or anything else?
That's all part of that that spreadsheet that
It's all
Paula is going to do, and then between districts, the special ed payment, as we
Right.
talked about, is pretty much at cost. So that's how that works
that's
between us.
pretty simple.
I don't think special ed's going to be a sticking point for us.
Okay.
But when we'll get an understanding of that from the spreadsheet from Paula, for the state subsidy part of that anyway.
You might clarify for sure that the default school board is 3. The problem with trying to get this onto the June ballot, we didn't have the time to get ballots printed for absentee, and that's why we weren't able to pull that together. But I think the council, and I meant to talk about it the other night, would be willing to mark that up to put on in November, because I think regardless of whether we withdraw or not, having that place marker in place, there is some language in there that says, currently the RSU is the school board and the Board of Education for Freeport. And it goes on to call it or assigns or successors. So there's some information there, but it doesn't specify that we would do something other than a default board of 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we should amend that in our charter so that we're able to have a full-size board ready to go to work. Because if we do decide to withdraw, there's a ton of work to be done in the first 6 months.
Right. So the important part is that people understand that when they're voting in November, whether or not they vote to support the withdrawal, they should vote for the charter amendment, right? All it does is make sure that if we do withdraw, we have a 7-person board instead of a 3-person board, which would be a lot of work for 3 people to do.
Or if we find ourselves alone, I mean, who knows? When we're all done with this, Pownell and Durham might want to withdraw. I don't know. We really don't know what's going on. But having that framework in place serves no harm.
Yeah.
And we could have left it worded differently, but we chose to word it that it assigns or successors, and that's how it reads now. So we're gonna reread that language and try and come up with something that is fairly simple and doesn't lead people to believe that, oh my God, if I do this, we're gonna have another board in place. Mm-hmm. It's similar to, we have the sewer district exists, but if the town takes them over as a department, we could acquire the sewer district by eminent domain. We would have a department within the town. Currently, we have a water district in Freeport, but Maine Water provides the water. We don't. They're the 3 board members who meet occasionally, and all they do is monitor prices and fees and stuff. So it's not unusual to have a committee or a framework for a board.
Even
that doesn't exist.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we can make that clear to folks.
Yeah. Okay. Any other dialogue for DOE?
I was just looking through our 11.
I mean, I think it'll be important. The main point for the discussion with the DOE on Thursday is for clarification on this, the issue of the 10-year contract school, which some people refer to as school of record. DOE does not like that term. It's essentially that you have to have a 10-year contract that says that you will take any student from the other community that shows up. And right now our position is we can't do that, right? We don't have the capacity in the high school to take those kids. And if we do a good job of what we think we want to do as a standalone district of creating a really great school system that everybody wants to come to and so forth, then we would be faced with expanding the high school and doing that on Freeport's dime alone, and that's not much of a withdrawal, really, right? So, the way the law reads is that there is a very specific set of criteria that need to be met by a withdrawal agreement in order for a community to withdraw from an RSU, and then there is a separate law, a separate requirement, that's a separate piece of legislation that requires communities to have a 10-year commitment if they don't have grade level offerings within their district. And the question is whether all of that needs to be solved in the context of withdrawal agreement, or not. And I think that the DOE will help us understand that and give us some clarity around that, and we'll be able to move forward based on that. So,
Big meeting.
it's a big meeting. It's a pretty big deal. Pretty important dialogue, I
I
think.
mean, reading through the 11 items that are, this is an excerpt from the MRSA, but it really doesn't talk about a 10-year contract. You know, and these are the
The 11
items.
things, yeah.
The
There's
items.
11 things, and we even met, I think, 10 of them. So I think we're pretty close to doing it with the TAs that we have on the table with respect to meeting the requirements for the law. So.
And our authority is limited to the statute. I mean, really, the school board should be making any decisions that affect the future of the school district.
And I think it's worth reminding folks that, you know, our job, you know, we were appointed as a committee to develop a withdrawal agreement that is agreed to by us, the working group, or the RSU, and DOE. Our job wasn't to fix this. Our job wasn't to plan forward. I mean, that's what our assignment is.
Dan.
We know that in order to make good decisions going forward, we're going to need to have more information on a proposed budget going forward, or a sample budget, if you will. But these 11 items and the best determination we can get from DOE on, you know, what that commitment is supposed to be or look like, or whether it's part of the actual agreement or not.
That's a question.
So we're going to have public comment right now, I think, unless there's anything else we have. We'll have public comment and questions, whatever you'd like. Hi, Kristen.
So actually, I had
Could
a
you
bunch
say
of
your name and
questions.
where you're from for the record? We're
We're
live.
Kristen Dorsey from Freeport. So I had a question about this whole school of record piece. And so you haven't already had a meeting with DOE? I thought it was scheduled earlier.
It's scheduled for next Thursday at 10 a.m. Yep. We've had several phone conversations, but this is the first time all three parties will be in the room.
Okay. So my first question was the way that term school of record has been being used, whether or not that is a concise term to be using in that context, because your group has been using it too. I know the other group kind of brought it up, but it's being used a lot, so it's sort of legitimizing it as a term that is necessary for this agreement, just to the outside.
The problem was if we called it peanut butter, they wouldn't know what we were talking about, so we were using their word.
The
I understand what they are meaning when they use that.
This is why whenever I talk about it, I try to talk about the provenance of that phrase, because I was talking with Paula today about the finances, like I said earlier, and I mentioned this phrase, school of record. She said, "Don't use that phrase." She said, "Don't use that phrase."
Something in
It has a
It has a
definition.
specific meaning in another context, and it's become colloquial for the district that signs a 10-year contract to take any student from the other district.
Right.
And I said, well, what is the right phrase? And she's, well, there is no phrase other than the district that signs the 10-year contract to take any and all students from the other district.
I mean,
and that's not, so that's why it comes up and why it trips off the tongue so easily. But you're right, it's important to be precise with the language.
And so just listening to what you were saying, it sounds like it's not part of your 11 steps, and that's a whole separate responsibility of the RSU board as it would stand if there were a withdrawal. So kind of slightly after the fact, that's when they need to confirm where their students can go.
Yep.
Does it have to be, I mean, to me it's almost like reverting back to school choice for them. It doesn't have to be one school, does it? They just need placement agreements that when you add it all up, this many are going to this school, this many can go to this school. Just so
it's possible that it's never been done that way to date. Is my understanding from the DOE, but the intent behind the requirement is that at any given time, a student knows that they can go to a school and knock on the door on October 1st, middle of the school year, and say, I'm here with all my warts and issues and problems. Here I am, take me, or whatever. And and that school cannot say no, right? So that's the issue, is that there is that certainty.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me it could be fulfilled by multiple districts, but it would be complicated to do it because there has to be an understanding of, why would these students have to get to go to this school and not this school and so forth. So
But it's however they did it with school choice, which
they didn't have it with school choice. This
mean?
this regulation, this
No, I
requirement,
mean pre-RSU in terms of Durham and Pownell not having their own high school.
they didn't have a requirement for a 10-year contract at that time.
We actually
Right, but the
we
way they
actually had
managed
an
it as
agreement.
far as school choice, however number of kids they had in a given year, it was the responsibility of, the Pownell School Board and the Durham School Board to make sure they had
That's correct.
seats somewhere to send their children.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so it was multiple schools.
Yeah,
So the way it's managed shouldn't
that's
be
not
that
necessarily, that's not
complicated.
actually true. Freeport had an agreement with Pownell. We educated
Right.
almost all of their students. They were ones who were tuitioned out of the schools because they had choice.
Mhm.
But we did have a signed agreement with them to educate their kids, and we
Mhm.
also helped them with transportation and many other things.
Right.
So, and
But-
I think
but
Durham was
Durham-
working with Brunswick
Mhm.
because that's where they provided transportation to.
Right.
So the bulk of the kids went there, but they did have choice. So some went to Edward Little, some went to Lisbon, some went
Right.
any number of places.
Right.
And Pownell had a contract with Greeley too of some sort
Yep.
because there was choice to go to Greeley
Yeah,
or,
there were
or
kids
And
going
Freeport.
that's when transportation.
But there wasn't
Right.
transportation going
Mhm.
there.
Right.
So there were, before we consolidated, there were some agreements in place.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so to that point, for whatever it's worth, I know a concern, especially with Pownell, like to me, this whole process should be an opportunity for all three towns to kind of rethink what would our relationship have become if there were no consolidation. I mean, clearly Pownell was moving towards collaboration with us. Perhaps at some point Durham would have made some arrangements with us for whatever, for shared services. And so if people start thinking of it more in those terms, that it's an opportunity for Pownell and Durham as well to, like, okay, what sort of convenient arrangement, financially and educationally would this be?
We'd
so-
love to talk about that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and if it
We'd
doesn't
love
have
to
to be
talk about that.
decided in a month,
Right.
it could take the time
Right.
to find out what the community
You might
wants.
attend a working group meeting and have the same conversation.
Is there not, I don't know, I didn't feel like there was an opportunity for public comment at those. Maybe
Not
I
at
missed
not
it.
at the negotiation
No.
sessions, but at the meeting of the RSU working group.
Yeah.
They take public comment then
Oh,
as well,
right,
just
right.
like we do. Yeah.
So,
So
And so to that point, I would not be opposed, and I don't know if it's something you would put on the table, in that we did, as an RSU, move the Pownell middle schoolers to the Freeport Middle School. If part of one of the negotiations, the negotiation piece, is that we would agree in entirety to to take all of the Pownell kids at our middle school and the high school, always be able to accommodate them, because even if there is a boom, in Pownell, it would still keep us within our numbers, and then whatever space there is still available, you guys may have already kind of thought of that, but
we already said it.
yeah, or said it, just as one piece of the puzzle, just to kind of alleviate that, because that would be moving more towards what we were probably going to end up doing eventually, with Pownell.
your point about using this as an opportunity to think about what the natural flow of things was prior to this kind of state interference that happened is a good one, I think, and it's a good way to frame how you might think about what might naturally settle out between these communities, and we'd like to talk about that, and we'd like to create the space for that natural settling, and accommodating and working together and coordination to happen as it goes forward. So absolutely.
And then the number that you're using for the capacity of the high school is 500. Isn't that the number that was used during the whole consolidation agreement, that was the number that the state arrived at? Was it
No.
500?
700.
Oh, they said 700. Okay, so the 500 is a
500
little more.
the 500 comes from the architect's analysis of the maximum number
Okay.
of students that you could
Like
reasonably
the actual
accommodate in here,
usable space. And
with all the space, every closet and everything being used
Okay.
in the school.
Okay.
It's not what we've been. It's one thing that's the technical building capacity when you talk about square feet per student and number of toilets per student and that sort of those kinds of ratios. But there's another thing that dictates. There's other factors that dictate capacity, such as program capacity, such as the way you utilize the space. If we, decide to put in a maker space in some classrooms, that takes up a lot of space, and offers a great opportunity for the kids. But it means that it reduces the number of kids that you can serve with the same square footage. So the capacity of the high school is a number that's not set in stone in any way. It's just that's the number that the architect had said we could maximally comfortably accommodate in this square footage if we used every room and every part.
Well, and the other part of this is you've got, you have some capacity issues already with cafeteria. You have some. There are a lot of things, and then your programming. I mean, some programs, if you build to a certain size, your costs are one place. If you add 50%, you may not just add 50% of costs.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to build a classroom, that's different than having to just occupy one that you have. So.
That's the hard part of trying to plan 5-10 years in the future with education, and as fast as it's changing right now, you really want to leave those decisions for the people who are going to be there at the time, planning the budget for the next year.
And the other thing, if this happens and we get really good at this, we won't have as many kids leaving, and there'll be more kids who want to come.
Exactly.
So, our problem may be that we will get to those capacities.
Capacity.
So the other sort of startling piece that I heard, what was it, May 8th? I forget what the meeting was. Yeah. I thought, just buzzing through quickly, I haven't had time to look at all the TAs you have done, but I thought one of the first ones you crossed off the list was that whatever agreement is reached, it can't force Freeport into incurring any costs for construction. Is that true?
No, it can't force. There's a requirement in the withdrawal law that says that any withdrawal cannot create a need for state-sponsored capital expansion.
Within 5 years.
Okay.
Within 5 years.
3 out of the 11. Okay. That's one of the requirements.
points.
Because it can be state. You don't want to have a withdrawal.
But we're not state-sponsored anyway, so that's really not a clause for us.
The
Right?
state have to come in and build a new high school.
But is there not some sort of legal thing in there where you don't have the authority to set up a future school board for any sort of decision like that? So it seemed to me, I was surprised how long that conversation went
It's ongoing.
as a thought, that you can't even have that conversation about, well, how about if we agree in the future to, we'll help you pay for it if.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point.
That's why that discussion didn't go far.
I mean, you've been a part of the dialogue. We've been talking about this building for 3, 4, how many years now? I mean, I'm sure a lot longer than that. I mean, we want the community to make that decision, ideally. It's sort of where I'm personally at. I won't speak for the committee, but my personal opinion is that we should leave that to the community to make that decision, because we've already had a lot of discussion on it.
Yeah.
Again, our authority here is narrow. It's to the statute.
Yeah.
It's what's given to us in the statute. So.
But I'm surprised that the conversation even made it as far as it did, because she, as the spokesperson for that group, doesn't have the authority to put that in there any place either.
No, she doesn't. Okay. And one of the things I've been clear about is people talking about capacity in school and building projects and what have you, is that whether we remain alone or an RSU, we have needs. There are capital needs in this building. We still need to renovate, whether we stay alone or don't.
Right.
And I think that's people need to remember that going forward. And one of the things that I find that always puzzles me, and we'll see in the next week what happens to the budget. I mean, I guess a lot of folks coming from Pownell and Durham for the meeting next week. I'm curious to see how that goes forward.
Mhm.
And that doesn't reflect the actual costs of the already approved,
Expansion.
renovation expansion here.
I think that's an important point, Rich, is that while we will need a renovation here at the high school, we will not need an expansion if we're
Right.
standing alone, right?
Clearly.
And that's a huge, unless
It's a
we
big
decide we need an expansion, which we can undertake that decision, at
That's
that
good.
time. But
Yeah.
there will not be a physical requirement based on Freeport enrollments to expand the footprint. And that footprint expansion is a significant chunk of that $16 million bond.
We have about as much high school as you can build on this acreage now. And I think we recognize that, because that was some of the questions we asked as town council when we talked with Lyndon. Lyndon also has a lot of information, so that if you decide to renovate or you can do this in stages or pieces or parts.
Right.
And I think that decision will be made by a future school board. How do you do this without disrupting education?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not our decision
And
to make.
based on more manageable numbers, like we can designate, this is how many other children we can accommodate or choose to accommodate. Yeah. Okay,
Well, thanks.
I think that was it.
Thanks for coming.
Sure.
All right, guys, in the
You
interest
don't have any questions?
in the interest of time, since Dan is here, clock is ticking.
The bill
We
bar.
should move into executive session. Can I have a motion, please, to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed? We're good to go. We'll stop
Thanks,
the
guys.
recording.
Thanks for coming.